How's it sound? Can you hear it? Doing a little sound test because we're in a different setup right now. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Welcome back, everybody, to Catherine's Book Club. And sorry about the terrible potato quality last week. My laptop apparently is not quite up to the task, so my fiance has very graciously set me up with her computer. So we will be giving this setup a try for this week, and hopefully that will deal with the skipping and the freezing and stuff that we were dealing with last week. Alright, so we have one new follower from last week, despite the technical issues. So welcome to Jade. Is it Shaheen? Shaheen? Is it sound good? Okay. Well, thank you. Alright, and thank you for coming back if you are visiting again. If this is your first time to check out this Twitch stream, this is an educational / entertaining, hopefully, Twitch for people who want to read English novels, but people who don't have as much English vocabulary as a 19th century novelist. So we read slowly through the stories, and then I go through vocabulary and cultural references that might be new to some readers. We're currently reading Bram Stoker's Dracula, and this is the 4th stream of that novel. Excuse my cats and dog, they're being a little dramatic right now. So, I'm a new streamer, which means that I'm not able to store videos long term on my channel. But if you go to my profile, you can find my YouTube page linked from my Twitch profile. And I have been uploading old streams on my YouTube page if you want to start with us from the beginning. Also, if I speak too quickly or if I breeze past something that you don't quite know, if you have any questions that aren't being answered, please just put them in the chat. I will happily answer them for you. Or you can go to my YouTube page and leave a comment if you like, and I'll be sure to go over those questions for you. Okay? So, now this is where the story is about to really start picking up. So far we have been following the first and the main protagonist of Dracula, whose name is Jonathan Harker. Is it still, the quality still okay? It sounds weird to me because I'm wearing headphones. Okay. So we've been following Jonathan Harker, who has been traveling east from London towards Transylvania. And of course, this is the original novel about Dracula and vampires in Transylvania. So as far as Jonathan Harker is concerned, he's only visiting some unusual countryside and meeting some peasants who have very strange superstitions. But now Jonathan Harker is about to meet the person that he has come to see. And this is a very mysterious and very important man whose name is Count Dracula. And so you might remember that Jonathan has been traveling so far on what is called a diligence or a diligence coach. This is a kind of big wagon or carriage that people would use to ride from city to city. So the protagonist, Jonathan, he is traveling in a coach or a carriage like this one, and he is going to meet a driver from his host, from Count Dracula, and he is going to change into another carriage to go to where he is going. All right, so here we are. So when we stopped reading last time, Jonathan was in a carriage and he was surrounded by peasants. There were country people in the carriage with him, and all of the people who were traveling with him seemed very, very sad. They talked about monsters and they talked about devils, and all of them are very sad for Jonathan, but he doesn't know why. He does not speak any languages except for English and a little bit of German, maybe some French or something, but he does not know Hungarian or Serbian or anything like that. So he can't understand what the problem is, but he knows that the people with him think that something bad will happen to him soon. And now we are going to start reading from this very long paragraph here. I will read the whole paragraph, but don't worry, because then I will stop and I will go back over everything with you. Okay. I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears in the beauty of the scene as we drove along, although, had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Before us lay a green, sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills, crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses, the blank gable end to the road. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom, apple, plum, pear, cherry. And as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with the fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of what they call here the Mittelland ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the grassy curve, or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillsides like tongues of flame. The road was rugged, but still we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. I could not understand then what the haste meant, but the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Borgo Prund. I was told that this road is in summertime excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect, it is different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. Of old, the hospodars would not repair them, lest the Turk should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten the war, which was always really at loading point. So we have a very long and complicated paragraph. This is not a plot paragraph, so nothing in the story is really happening, but he's talking about the countryside. So the first part of the paragraph talks about the scenery, like the things that Jonathan can see. And the second part talks about the road. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Okay. Alright, so the first half of this paragraph says, the first half of this first sentence says, I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears in the beauty of the scene as we drove along. So your recollection is your memory. To recollect is to remember. And so Jonathan was remembering scary things at first, but then the scene, the things around him were so beautiful. The beauty of the scene was so amazing that he forgot about those things that he was scared of. Although, now he changes, right? Although means sort of, but if I had known the language, had I known the language, or rather languages which my fellow passengers were speaking. So he says he did not understand the words that the passengers were saying, so he was just riding along and looking at the windows. But if Jonathan knew what the other people in the wagon were saying, maybe he could not throw them off, throw those sad, scary memories off so easily. And so Jonathan, he can't understand the conversation around him, and so he just looks out the window. Okay. So before us, which in this case means in front of us, before us lay a green sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills. Okay, so we are looking in a lot of hills, maybe some bigger hills like this. And the steep hills are crowned with clumps of trees. Let's put two steep hills here. Remember, steep means that it goes straight up and down like this and not in a gentler way like this. So some of these steep hills are crowned with clumps of trees. That means that at the top of the hill, like a crown, you can see groups of trees like this. A tight group is called a clump. So some of the hills are crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses. And the farmhouse, of course, is the farmer's house, the blank gable end to the road. This word gable is a part of the house's roof. It's the point, the part that comes up like a triangle. And so when you look at these houses, you don't see the windows from the road. You only see the side of the house like this. So there are no windows. You can't see the people in the houses. But it's okay because it's very beautiful. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom. This word blossom, maybe you heard it before. A blossom is a flower, and usually it means the flower on a tree. So we can think of fruit trees, apple, plum, pear, and cherry, right? So an apple blossom looks like this. Those beautiful pinky white flowers. Plum blossom. More pink maybe. Pear blossom. They're white, and then of course cherry blossom, maybe you know. It's a very soft, beautiful pink color. And so this countryside is very, very beautiful. You might remember from last time that it is the 4th or the 5th of May. So it is early springtime. The land is all covered with these beautiful trees, beautiful trees and the beautiful flowers on the trees. I think that's enough trees. Hey, I said stop. What in the world? Oh my God. Okay. Okay, and as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with the fallen petals. Spangles are like stars. So you have the beautiful green grass here, and then the petals of the flower, the little leaf parts of the flower, are kind of dotted around in the green grass like stars. Okay. In and out amongst these green trees of what they call here the Mittelland round the road. Okay, Mittelland, of course, is middle land, right? Central land, this is German. But I'm guessing that means middle land because it sounds like it in English. So the road is coming in and out of the hills. So we have these beautiful green hills. One here, one here, one over here. And then in and out of these green hills, the road is coming this way and it's coming that way. And Jonathan in the carriage is riding on this road and looking at the scenery. Okay, losing itself. So the road is losing itself. It's disappearing into the mountains as it swept round the grassy curve or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods. So the word straggling means kind of falling off to nothing, right? Becoming smaller and then disappearing. So you can see a pine wood, like a forest of pine trees, maybe grows up very thickly on the top of the hills, but then as it gets lower, it kind of straggles out and it hides the road a little bit. So it's a very beautiful countryside, but there's a lot of shadow. You can't really see very well where you're going. But that's okay because right now for Jonathan, it is still afternoon. It's not a dangerous time of day. Okay. But now we come to the second half of the paragraph, and there we begin to see a hint of danger in this landscape. He says the road was rugged. A rugged road is a road that is very rough. It is not a smooth road, right? The road was rugged, but still we seem to fly over it with a feverish haste. That means that even though the road is not good and it's not very safe to drive quickly, the carriage is going very, very quickly on the road. Haste means hurry. I find my high-tech whiteboard here. So haste haste is a rush or a hurry. So the road is very rough, but the carriage is going very quickly. And Jonathan says, I could not understand then what the haste meant. Like he doesn't know why the driver is going so fast. But the driver was evidently, it means he was clearly bent on losing no more time in reaching Borgo Prunt. So if you are bent on something, you are determined to do it. You are absolutely going to do this no matter what happens. Okay, so the driver has it in his mind. He is going to get to the next city as fast as he can, and it doesn't matter what happens. All right, next sentence. I was told that this road is in summertime excellent. So we've reversed our usual road order. I mean, the road is usually excellent in summertime, but it's not quite summer yet. It's very early May. And so the road had not yet been put in order. They did not fix it yet. To put something in order is to fix it and clean it and make it better. So the road had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. These are the Carpathian Mountains, right? Carpathian Mountains, winter, let's see. And in the winter, it is very snowy in the Carpathians, and the roads are covered with snow. And so this road is very wet and very muddy and not in good condition. It's interesting, actually, that Jonathan says that it's interesting that usually the road was in good condition. It says, in this respect, it is different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians. He says this is different for how most roads in the Carpathian Mountains are, because usually it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. So people in the Carpathian Mountains like the roads to be a little bit bad. They should not be too good, in too good order. And the reason is, so we say, of old, the hospodars would not repair them. So the hospodars, I think, is a ruling group. My history is a little weak here. The lords, right, the rulers of the land, would not repair the road. So if the road was broken and bad, that was good. The hospodars, the lords, would not fix the roads lest the Turks should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops. This word lest means in case, or for fear. Lest is for fear that. So for example, I did not want to speak rudely to my mother, lest she should punish me. This means I did not speak rudely to my mother because I was afraid that if I did speak rudely to my mother, she would punish me. So here we have, the hospodars would not repair the roads lest the Turks should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops. They were talking about the Ottoman Turks, who were kind of on the borders of this territory at this time. So lest the Turks should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten the war, which was always really at loading point. To hasten something is to make it happen more quickly. And the war was always really at loading point. He's talking about loading like a cannon. Load cannon. And so Jonathan is saying that in this territory, war is always waiting like a big gun, just waiting for a reason to start. And so the lords of the countryside did not fix the roads in the mountain because they're afraid that the Ottoman Turks, the rulers of the Ottoman Empire, who were very close by at this time, maybe would think, oh, why are they fixing these roads in the mountains? They're going to bring in an army and fight us, so we should kill them now. So they left the roads to be messy. A lot of discussion about roads. And now let's move on to our next paragraph. Okay. Beyond the green swelling hills of the Middle Land rose mighty slopes of forest up to the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range, deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock mingled, and an endless perspective of jagged rock and pointed crags, till these were themselves lost in the distance, where the snowy peaks rose grandly. Here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of a hill and opened up the lofty, snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound on our serpentine way, to be right before us. So Jonathan is continuing to drive through the mountains, and this is just a description of that long journey. Beyond the green, swelling hills of the Middle Land. So swelling is getting bigger. The swelling hills, so the hills are starting like this, and then the next hill is bigger, and the next hill is bigger, right? And beyond these green swelling hills, that means past those hills, after those hills, rose mighty slopes of forest up to the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. So we have first in the foreground here, we have these smaller hills, and then beyond these hills, that means after these hills, a little bit darker and a little bit bigger, we have great slopes, mighty slopes of forest. A slope is a big hill or a mountainside, and these are covered with trees. And they rose, they got bigger, up to the lofty steeps, the very high pointed tops of the Carpathian mountains themselves. These are the big mountains in the area. So Jonathan is kind of here, but he's looking past these hills to bigger hills with trees and then up to the mountains. Right and left of us they towered, so the hills are on the right, the hills are on the left. Here's the little carriage running through the road. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range. In this case, a range is a line of mountains. A mountain range is like a chain of mountains. And the Carpathians are the mountain range that Jonathan is looking at. And we can see that there are lots of beautiful colors in the mountains. There are browns and whites and pinks and reds. And it's afternoon, so everything looks really beautiful. Deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peak. So here's a mountain peak, right? And the shadows are going to be blue and purple. The darker parts will be blue and purple. Green and brown where grass and rock mingled. To mingle is to come together, right? So we have grass maybe in this part, and then in this part, I can't find brown, but the rocks meet the grass. All these different colors are mixing together, okay? Now at the end, one of my companions, that means one of the people who's riding with him, touches his arm. One of my companions touched my arm, and the companion says, "Look, Istan Sek," which means, as Jonathan says, God's seat, and he crossed himself reverently. See if we can find a picture. Istan Sek. Second. Aha. So we have a mountain that's shaped a little bit like a chair, right? And so they call that the seat of God. So this is where they're driving. All right, now the time is moving on, and it's starting to get a little darker, and it's starting to get a little bit creepier now. As we wound on our endless way, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep round us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain top still held the sunset and seemed to glow out with a delicate cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs. Here's an old spelling of the word Czech. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slovaks, all in picturesque attire, but I noticed that goiter was painfully prevalent. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed, in the self-surrender of devotion, to have neither eyes nor ears for the outer world. There were many things new to me. For instance, hayricks in the trees, and here and there very beautiful masses of weeping birch, their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of the leaves. Okay, so we're still talking about Jonathan's journey, right? As we wound on our endless way. So the carriage is going on and on and on and on. It's a very long road going around the mountains. And the sun sank. Of course, sank is the past tense word of sink, right? So to go down is to sink. So the sun behind the carriage is going down. It is becoming evening time, right? The shadows of the evening began to creep or to move slowly around us. So it is becoming evening, and Jonathan is still riding through the mountains in this carriage. So by this word this, he means the fact that it was becoming evening, right? This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountaintop still held the sunset. So if you look up at the mountaintop, which is covered with snow, you still see up there the light of the setting sun is still there, but sunset doesn't happen all at the same time. So in the lower places, it's getting quite dark, right? And the carriage is much lower than the mountains, and so they're starting to go into darker and darker countryside because it's becoming nighttime. Okay, here and there we pass Czechs and Slovaks. Of course, we mean like Czech and Slovak people. They're all wearing their traditional clothing. Traditional Czech clothing looks like this. And traditional Slovak clothing looks like this. Kind of similar, kind of different. And Jonathan says it was very picturesque. It was picturesque attire. Right, your attire is what you are wearing, and if something is picturesque, it is like a picture. It's a little unusual, maybe a little bit strange, because Jonathan is just English. He hasn't traveled very much. Okay, but I noticed that goiter was painfully prevalent. The word prevalent means common. It means it happens a lot, and goiter is an unfortunate medical condition where you get a big lump on your neck. So it's something that Jonathan is noticing, maybe from living in bad circumstances. So, if you look at them from far away, they look very cool, very interesting, kind of cute maybe. But then when you look close up, you can see that the people he's seeing are actually quite sick. And you can remember that because this book is about a person who looks very normal and very good at first, but then when you look closer at him, you see that there's something wrong with him. Now, by the roadside were many crosses, right? So we're talking about this shape sticking into the roadside. In modern times, if there's a cross by the roadside, that usually means that somebody died there in a car accident. But of course, there were not really automobiles at that time, so these are just people who have put crosses in the road by their houses, maybe because somebody died there, but maybe they just want to be protected. They think they need God to protect them from something. So we find out that this is a place where people are scared of something. As we swept by, so the word swept is the past tense form of sweep. Swept. So the carriage is moving like this. It is sweeping. It's moving quickly. So as we swept by, They did not even turn around. So the people who were looking at these crosses, they were thinking only of praying and only of how scared they were. They did not even look at the carriage that was riding on the road. Okay, so Jonathan talks about some new things he sees. He can see hayricks or haystacks in the trees. A hayrick, I'm not sure what a European hayrick looks like. Just a pile of hay in the trees. And then he also sees some weeping birches, which are these beautiful drooping trees, and they have white colored bark, right? So he says their white stems shine like silver. So Jonathan's like, oh yeah, you know, the countryside is still very interesting. It's still very cool, but we're starting to see some things that are a little scary. All right, so now it's going to get a little bit darker and a little bit more dangerous. Now and again we passed a lighter wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long snake-like vertebra calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated quite a group of homecoming peasants, the Czechs with their white and the Slovaks with their coloured sheepskins, the latter carrying lance-fashion their long staves, with axe at end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness the gloom of the trees, oak, beech, and pine, though in the valleys which ran deep between the spurs of the hills, as we ascended through the pass, the dark firs stood out here and there against the background of late-lying snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods that seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us, great masses of greyness, which here and there bestrewed the trees, produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. Sometimes the hills were so steep that despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up them, as we do at home, but the driver would not hear of it. No, no, he said, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. And then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasantry, for he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest, and you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. The only stop he would make was a moment's pause to light his lamps. Now it's getting darker and darker, and Jonathan is beginning to feel a little bit more cold and nervous. So now and again, that means every once in a while, so sometimes, we passed a lighter wagon. Let's have a look at what that looks like, because I haven't seen one. Lighter wagon. So it's a very long and thin cart. He talks about the snake-like vertebrae, right? A snake's vertebrae are the side bones of the snake, right? Like this. And so he looks at the wagon and he thinks that these sticks make it look like a snake's skeleton. This is the ordinary peasant's cart, so most people in this area use this wagon to carry their things because it is calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. Remember that the road is very rough and bumpy, and this long wagon is good at traveling on a bumpy road. On this, now this refers up here to lighter wagon. So on the wagon, so he's saying that he can see the peasants coming home from the farms, the Czechs with their white and the Slovaks with their colored sheepskins. So white and colored, these two adjectives, both of them refer to sheepskins, which is the wool of the sheep, white sheepskin. Looks like this. So Czech peasants, he says, wear white sheepskins, and Slovak peasants wear colored or colorful ones. Probably not quite this colorful. And so he looks at the peasants who are riding in the carts. And now we're going to move on from the peasants into the weather. So the evening is falling, it's becoming evening, and as the evening fell, it began to get very cold. And the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness, the gloom of the trees. To merge is to join two things together, and gloom is like darkness or shadow. And so, it's not a Pokemon. Gloom under trees, let's say. So if you look, okay, let's just say tree shadows. So you can look at the trees and you can see that underneath the trees are very dark. You have these individual shadows, but as it's become night, those individual shadows are coming together and everything is just becoming dark. The growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness, the gloom of the trees, oak, beech, and pine. These are three kinds of trees. All right. He talks about the dark firs. A fir is another kind of tree. So it's very dark. You're able to see the trees. There's a little bit of snow. And sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods, it seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us. So here's the road. Here's the pine forest beside the road. I think red is a not good color for this. Pine forest. Right, so here's the pine forest on either side of the road. And the road is passing through this sort of dark woods. And sometimes great masses of grayness, which here and there bestrewed the trees, produced a particularly weird and solemn effect. So the grayness, we don't exactly know what it is. Maybe it's just like mist, you know, like fog. Like here you can see that there are kind of clouds in the trees, and Jonathan is saying that sometimes these great masses of grayness produced or made a weird and solemn effect. Now, weird in this case does not mean strange. Weird, I mean, it does not mean just like only strange, but strange in kind of like a magical or a witchy way. So he feels like some bad magic is happening. Solemn is very, very serious. So if something is weird and solemn, it's sort of like a very dark and a little bit frightening situation. And this effect carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered early in the evening. So to engender something is to create it, and the thoughts and the grim fancies or the dark sort of imaginations that were created early in the evening were, you know, when the people at dinner at the inn were all talking about how Jonathan's going to see the devil, right? So he'd forgotten about that at first. Jonathan has forgotten for a little while that everybody thinks he's in danger, but now he's looking into those dark pine forests and he's starting to feel a little bit nervous. He's starting to remember those stories people were talking about it. Okay, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds, which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. A valley is a space between two mountains. So here are two mountains and the valley is right here. And in the valleys of the Carpathians, he says, there are always ghost-like clouds. They are winding ceaselessly without stopping through these valleys. And he says that in the sunset, the falling sunset makes them even more noticeable. It throws them into strange relief. So let's say Carpathian Valley sunset. If we can see some of these clouds. Maybe it's just beautiful, I think. Here we go. You can see these clouds and the sun is falling on these clouds. And you really notice how misty and mysterious they look. All right, and sometimes, so here is where again we start to get a hint of danger. Sometimes the hills were so steep. Remember that steep means that the hill goes up like this, right? And the hills were so steep that the horses could only go slowly. So Jonathan, who's a pretty nice guy, he sees that the horses are tired and he wants to help. So he says, I wish to get down and walk up them. He wants to walk up the hills so that the horses don't have to work so hard. But the driver would not hear about it. The driver says, absolutely not. He will not even listen to the question. No, no, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. So that's the excuse that the driver gives for the danger, but we'll find out later that there's probably something more dangerous happening here than dogs. All right, and then he added, with what he evidently means like apparently or probably, he probably meant it as a grim pleasantry, like as a dark joke. So he's probably joking or trying to joke because he looked around at the other people. He looked around to catch the approving smile of the rest, and he said, and you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. We have the dogs are too fierce, and then he says such matters as fierce dogs. So he's saying before you go to sleep tonight, you are probably going to see a lot of scary things. So you should sit in the carriage now. Don't get out and walk. And you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. So he would not stop the carriage even one time except to light his lamps, right? Because you don't want to be doing this in the dark, no matter how dangerous it is in the daytime. It's much worse at nighttime. So we've got a carriage lamp, and the driver lights this, and that's the only light that they're going to have for the rest of the trip, because of course there are no electric lights in the 19th century in the middle of the mountains. All right, so here we're going to meet our first, we're not quite there, but we're coming to the place where Jonathan is supposed to get out of this carriage, and he's supposed to get into another carriage and move on to his destination. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement amongst the passengers. Maybe I won't read the whole paragraph first, guys. Maybe I'll just read and pause. So excitement usually in modern English means you're happy and excited, yeah? Here it just means they're nervous. They're thinking and worried and upset about things. Oh, Juju Moore has got a question. The book was written in the late 1890s. Juju Moore says, what year is the book set in? I believe it was written in 1897. So 1897. I'm going to say that probably the story was happening around that time, or maybe a couple of years before. So it's not super, super, super old-fashioned, but it's, not really modern technology. Good question. So in England, in London, they would have subways, and they would have probably some early cars to drive around in, but the farther you get from big cities, then the less technology you're going to have. Okay, so there seemed to be some excitement among the passengers, and they kept speaking to him. They're speaking to the driver of the carriage one after the other, as though urging him to further speed. They're trying to tell him he needs to go faster. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip. So we have got a horse whip. I'm not going to Google horse whip because it can cause some damage. So a kind carriage driver will just make a noise with the horse whip to scare the horses and make them keep going. But this driver is lashing, or he's beating the horses unmercifully. He's not trying to save them any pain. He's hurting them as much as he needs to make them go faster. And with wild cries of encouragement, urged the horses on to further exertions. So he hit them and he shouted at them so that they would work harder. Then, through the darkness, I could see a sort of patch of gray light ahead of us, as though there were a cleft in the hills. So a cleft is a crack. So the hills are usually like this, but he thinks there's kind of a little opening in the hills. I keep getting this red marker. And out of the opening, he sees a little bit of bright gray light. So something is happening up ahead of us. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. Again, this is not happy excitement, this is nervousness. The passengers are scared. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs, so the coach is going back and forth like this, and swayed like a boat tossed on a stormy sea. I had to hold on, so the driver is going even faster now. The road grew more level, so it became smoother. It stopped going up and down, and we appeared to fly along. So the road became smooth, and the horses just booked it. They ran as fast as they could run. And then the mountains seemed to come near to us on each side and to frown down upon us. So the mountains have been here, but now the mountains are closer together, so they're framing the carriage on either side. We were entering on the Borgo Pass. This was the destination that Jonathan had. This is where the carriage driver is supposed to let Jonathan out of the carriage, and Jonathan is going to switch into another carriage that's going to take him to Castle Dracula, to the place where Dracula lives. All right, so now everybody's pretty sure Jonathan's going to die. So one by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts, which they pressed upon me with an earnestness which would take no denial. So to press is to push, but you can push a gift on somebody by saying, yes, please take it, you have to take it. So they offer him gifts, but they have an earnestness, which is like a strong feeling, which would take no denial. I don't know if you know the word denial. Let's clear this off. To deny is to refuse or to say no. So we can use it in a couple ways. We can say, I deny that I did it. That means that I say I did not do it. Or we can say, I denied the gift, which means I refused to take the gift. That's what we're looking at in this case. It's a little bit older way to use the word deny. A denial is, denying or refusing something. But he could not deny the gift because they were offered with an earnestness which would take no denial. These were certainly of an odd and varied kind. So by these we mean the gifts, of course. That's the last noun that we looked at. These gifts were certainly of an odd and varied kind. So they were strange, and there were many different kinds of things, but each was given in simple good faith. So that means the person really wanted him to have this gift. They gave it to him only because they wanted him to have it, with a kindly word and a blessing. And that same strange mixture of fear-meaning movements, which I had seen outside the hotel at Bistritz. So if you were listening last week, you remember when Jonathan was at the hotel, the people kept doing this. They would do a cross sign and then they would point at Jonathan. So they're saying, good luck, man. Hope you don't die. The sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward, and on each side the passengers, craning over the edge of the coach, so they're leaning out like this, peered eagerly into the darkness. To peer is to look very closely. So everyone is staring out into the darkness. It is nighttime now. They're looking out of the carriage, and it was evident that something very exciting was either happening or expected. But though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the slightest explanation. So everyone is looking out the windows, waiting for the next big thing to happen. This state of excitement kept on for some little time. So they ride on through the woods, everybody's waiting for the next thing to happen. And at last, we saw before us the pass, opening out onto the eastern side. Again, a pass is an opening in the mountains. So you have mountains on one side, you have mountains on the other side, and then you have the pass that lets you go between the mountains. And this is where Jonathan is going to get out of the carriage. The carriage is going to go on through the pass into safer countryside, but Jonathan is staying here in the mountains. Okay. One moment, please. There were dark, rolling clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy, oppressive sense of thunder. So not only is it dark outside, but it's probably going to be storming soon. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had got into the thunderous one. This is an interesting way to describe things. So an atmosphere, of course, is the sky. And he's saying that it seemed like on one side the atmosphere, the sky in the mountains was very kind of clear and bright and beautiful. So you have the bright, pretty sunset sky on the one side, and then suddenly, as if you're crossing through a line, you come into the dark and stormy sky. And it's just going to be dark and gloomy and rainy from here on out. Okay. I was now myself looking out for the conveyance which was to take me to the Count. A conveyance is something that you can ride in, like a carriage or a car. So he's looking for the way he's going to get to his destination. Each moment I expected to see the glare of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was the flickering rays of our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. Okay, so we are riding through the darkness, but how can horses make steam? I think that he's talking about the steam. You know, steam is like clouds, like water vapor. Right, so horses, steam. If horses are working very hard, their bodies will be very hot and probably wet, and the wet air rises, and you can see this. So Jonathan is looking into the darkness, and all he sees is this gray steam that is coming from the horses' backs. There's nothing else that he can see. We could see now the sandy road lying white before us, but there was on it, that means on the road, right? We could see the road, but there was on the road no sign of a vehicle. So there's no car or carriage on the road anywhere. The passengers drew back with a sigh of gladness, which seemed to mock my own disappointment. They're like, phew. I was already thinking what I had best do, because remember that Jonathan is on a business trip. He's been sent here by his bosses to meet with an important customer. I was already thinking what I had best do when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the others something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly and in so low a tone, I thought it was an hour less than the time. So they have been driving so fast that they came to this pass. They came to the, I forgot the name of the pass. They came to the meeting point, the Borgo Pass, 1 hour early. And the driver's like, we're an hour early. Looks around and he says, oh, too bad. They're not here. I guess you gotta go. Then turning to me, he spoke in German worse than my own. There is no carriage here. The Herr is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina and return tomorrow or the next day. Better the next day. So he has been driving the horse so fast because he does not want Jonathan to get out of the carriage. So they get here an hour early. They look around. Oops, guess they're not here. Sorry. The Herr, remember that means the young man. It's in German. Oh, sorry, sir. You're not expected at all. No one's waiting for you. He, that means you, right? You, Jonathan. Oh, he will now come on to Bukovina. You can come back here tomorrow, or maybe the day after tomorrow. Better that you wait till the day after tomorrow. Because if you remember, it is the eve of St. George's Day in this story. St. George's Eve. And in this story, the eve of St. George's Day is sort of a magical time where all the evil things in the world are extra powerful. Right, so this is a really, really, really bad time to be coming out to meet a vampire. All right, and so the carriage driver is like, well, sorry, guess they're not here after all. What a shame. Whilst he was speaking, so unfortunately he spoke too soon. Whilst he was speaking, or at the same time when he was speaking, the horses began to neigh, to make horse noises, and snort and plunge wildly. So the horses are, and they're making snorting noises like, and then plunging. They're going up and down. The horses are going crazy, so that the driver had to hold them up. And then, amongst a chorus of screams from the peasants and a universal crossing of themselves, a caleche with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and drew up beside the coach. Okay? So they were just about to leave, but the horses started to go crazy, and then a new carriage comes. This is called a caleche. It's a much smaller and much faster carriage. There are 4 horses on this caleche. 4 horses, excuse me. I guess it's not common to have a caleche with 4 horses these days. It overtook them. To overtake is to be faster. So they come up and they catch up to the diligence coach, and drew up. So they come up beside the coach and they stop and drew up beside the coach. So even though the diligence coach has come to this place 1 hour early, still this person is here already to meet Jonathan. I could see from the flash of our lamps as the rays fell on them, that means on the horses. I could see from the flash of our lamps as the rays fell on them that the horses were coal black and splendid animals. Splendid means they were very wonderful, beautiful horses. They were driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. And driven, of course, is the 3rd form of drive. Drive, drove, driven. So I drive the car today. I drove the car yesterday. And then we might say the car was driven by me. Okay, so the horses were driven by a tall and mysterious man. And Jonathan cannot see this man's face. This is going to be important and a little bit funny later. You'll see why he can't see the man's face. I could only see the gleam, the shine, right? Gleam is like a shine or a sparkle. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight as he turned to us. He said to the driver, "You are early tonight, my friend." And so we know that this person has driven very, very fast in order to catch and meet Jonathan. So even though it is 1 hour early, the driver of the carriage was too slow, and this mysterious new tall man was able to catch him. He said to the driver, "You are early tonight, my friend." The man stammered in reply. The English Herr was in a hurry. To stammer is to speak like I, or he. You have to repeat the sounds over and over again because you're nervous. The English Herr was in a hurry. To which the stranger replied. That means the stranger answered in answer to this, to which the stranger replied, "That is why I suppose you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." Swift means very fast, right? So the stranger knows that this carriage driver is lying, right? The carriage driver says, "Oh, I was going fast because this man from England, he was in a big hurry to come here." And then the stranger says, "Yeah, no, I heard you tell him that he should go with you to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me. That means you cannot trick me. I'm too smart for you. I know too much, and my horses are fast." Okay. As he spoke, he smiled, and the lamplight fell on a hard-looking mouth with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another the line from Burger's Lenore, "Denn die Toten reiten schnell," for the dead travel fast. So as he spoke is the past tense of the verb to speak or to talk, right? Speak, spoke. So he talked very he talked, and as he was talking, he smiled. It says he has a hard-looking mouth. Of course, your mouth cannot really feel hard. It just means there's no feeling, there's no love in the way that he smiles. It's just like, but maybe harder than that. Very red lips, sharp-looking teeth. So there's something wrong with the mouth of this man, something a little bit vampire-like to a modern audience. It was not the first vampire novel. There were a few of them that came before it, but this was definitely the most popular and the most famous of the early vampire novels. There's another one called Carmilla that I have never read before that I'm very interested in reading someday. And Carmilla came out like 25 years before Dracula, so Gothic novels or vampire novels were already kind of popular at the time. And so people would know that a strange, mysterious man with red lips and very sharp teeth probably does a lot of biting when he should not be biting, right? He probably is some kind of a monster. But we don't know for sure yet. And then one of the people on the carriage says, "For the dead travel fast." And we can guess that he's saying the dead is referring to this tall, mysterious man with the sharp white teeth. Okay, then we have the strange driver evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. Remember that evidently means clearly, like we can see that he heard the words because we know he heard it because he looked up and he smiled. The passenger turned his face away, at the same time putting out his two fingers and crossing himself. "Give me the hare's luggage," said the driver. So give me that gentleman's luggage. And with exceeding alacrity, my bags were handed out and put in the calash. Alacrity, if you do something with alacrity, you do it very, very fast, and you do it with a lot of attention. So everybody's like, "Yep, here you go." They hand him the bags right away, and they put the bags into the new carriage. Then I descended. I came down, right? To descend is to come down. Then I descended from the side of the coach as the caleche was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel, right? Your grip is how tightly you're able to hold something, and steel is that metal we make from iron. So if your grip is like steel, it is absolutely unbreakable, right? This man is super strong, and it says here, his strength must have been prodigious. Prodigious means amazing, so it's like, wow, he must have been amazingly strong. Okay, I'm looking for a good place to stop. I think that this is going to be a good place to stop for today, since it's been about an hour. And then I'm thinking of starting to stream on Wednesdays as well as on Sundays. I don't know if that will be this week or next week or when, but I'll put up a schedule and try to do some kind of alert before the next stream. Anyway, the next time we will go on and see Jonathan's trip to Castle Dracula, which goes on for quite a long time, actually. I think we don't even get to see the inside of the castle until chapter 2, but that's coming soon enough. Alright, so thank you all again for joining me this week. It was very nice to see you, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day, and do some reading. See you next time. Bye.